do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
Well, good morning and grand rising, and welcome to the June the 1st, 2021 edition of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Now, to get in contact with the show, call this number, which is 516-453-9921. And when you call that number, be sure to depress the number 1 button so that you can get in line or rotation so that your calls can be heard. So make sure you do that. You can also Gmail me at the numeral number 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY @gmail.com. And that'll be good. Chances are it will not be read today, but you can still do that. And at a point in time on another show, it could be read. Chat room is now open, and we have several in there. Purdue's 21 is in. Morpheus, thank you. Be Good One, thank you. Sankofa's in there. And a special hello to Aaron Litton Chambers in France. I spoke to him earlier this morning and told him that I would mention his name today, so he's in here too. You're all welcome to call, so let's kick this thing off by saying good morning, Mr. Fuller, and how are you? Good morning. I'm still learning. Yes, sir. Mr. Fuller, you were born, I think, in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Is that correct, sir? Yes, sir. Okay. Today or yesterday and all this weekend, there's been a lot of discussion about the Tulsa race riots, and I've heard different people speak on it, and there's been several documentaries out. I understand that you were born after that. Now, those of us right now, we have the privilege of speaking to you as someone who was in the state of Oklahoma near, I guess, the time of that terrible massacre that was kept out of the history books and everything. It happened over 100 years ago. Since you were there, not at the time that the riot happened, but afterwards, what are your memories or what was told to you about that, or how was the climate like when you were born or were old enough to understand what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma back in 1921?
Well, I was born in 1929, and at that time, it was mentioned years later, because when I was born, I mean, naturally I wouldn't understand at 1 year old just being born, 1929, and the incident happened in 1921. So even if people talked about it then, I didn't hear anything about it. But about the time I got around maybe 7, 8 years old, maybe 10, I heard about it, but only in passing. I heard about it like you would hear about maybe the Civil War, so-called. And it was just, people would mention it every now and then, but just in passing, just kind of like barbershop talk in general. And they would recite some incident, like there was a local person, a business person, who took 3 carloads, I understand, of black people 60 miles away to Tulsa, Oklahoma, from Muskogee, which is where I was born. And they went over there with shotguns and rifles. Some of them had been World War I veterans, and to try to help out. But I understand that they arrived going by muddy road and all like that. It was a little too late. Everything was all over by then, by the time they arrived there. So they couldn't make any kind of contribution as far as trying to defend the black people who were there in Tulsa. Mm-hmm. But I understand that it was led by a person who was, at that time, one of the few prominent business people in Muskogee. But other than that, it was no details of anything except it was horrible. They just said it was real bad. A lot of people got killed. And they kind of talked about it the way that people would talk now about the so-called Civil War, like it was ancient history. And that was it. We never heard any details. We said, I heard how it started, incident involving a black male with a white female. That's always explosive. I mean, that's dynamite looking for a fuse anywhere. Okay, at that time. I mean, that's automatic. Somebody's going to get a death sentence. Black male, white female, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, everything, that's the world's coming to an end behind that type of thing. Now, I understood that at a very early age. Don't come nowhere near a white woman in any kind of way that looks suspicious. Look down at your shoes, Negro. Don't look her in the eye. Take your hat off, or it gets slapped off, all right, when you're talking to her. That was it. That was the atmosphere that I was born in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All righty, I thought I would ask that question because most of what I hear or read is in books or on docudramas on television, but to hear somebody who's been there, even though you were born in 1929, and of course I have never been into the state of Oklahoma, but just hearing somebody, just like those people, survivors of it, I think there's at least 3, they're over 100 years old, and they spoke about it, and the memories of it are very vivid and just horrible, as you mentioned, the things that happened there. Okay, anyway, just thought I would do that today. Here's a question from a gentleman in England. It says, do you have any regrets? It says, Mr. Fuller, I am in my early 40s, and I was asked by a friend who is 80 years old to take over his community charitable organization that assists black people. However, due to recent bad personal experiences with black people, I find myself becoming increasingly resentful and outright intolerant of black people, so I do not feel like taking over this charitable role. I remind myself that the likes of Marcus Garvey and Dr. John Henry Clark died penniless and bitter. Also, Brother Malcolm X was murdered by black people. I do not want to suffer the same fate. Mr. Fuller, has there ever been a time when you have been so frustrated with the willful ignorance and stupidity of black people that you thought about packing in your counter-racist code work altogether?
Oh, no. because I expect black people to act the way that they do. I understand it. I mean, we're very poisonous people. We're loaded with just about every fault that you can name. I do not believe in, like a lot of people do, praising black people at any level. I mean, we're pitiful, and that's how I describe it in the textbook. Pitiful, primitive, silly. All of those things fit us as prisoners of war to the system of white supremacy going on this long. We would have to be very primitive. We'd have to be worthy of pity. That's the main one. Pity, primitive, stupid, silly. That's the major description for black people worldwide. There are exceptions, and the exceptions really stand out. But generally speaking, accurately, in my opinion, right from the beginning, when I really stood back and looked at us, including myself, we are pitiful people. That's the first one. Say so in the textbook. That's what I put in there. We are worthy of pity because we have been beaten down so much that we are just as crazy as we can be. We look crazy. We act crazy. We go out of our way to even look crazy. A bunch of black people actually look that way. We look insane. Like if you look at these TV program, The Walking Dead, zombies, a bunch of us, we don't seem that way to ourselves, but that's in real perspective. A Martian or somebody, the Venusians, you might say from another planet, whatnot, they would say we're some pretty strange creatures. We don't seem to be doing anything that makes sense. We spend a whole lot of time trying to look certain ways to each other, and trying to impress each other by doing certain things that make no sense at all, drive-by shootings, and then mourning and groaning after the shooting dies down, and then back to it again, over and over and over and over and over and over again. And if somebody mentions it, we say, oh, well, let's talk about something else. Say, don't these people know how to handle anything? So in answer to the question, no. I never felt, once I made an assessment of the power of the system of white supremacy and how it can make a complete wreck of a whole people over a period of time, and do it with such ease. It didn't take a lot of effort. The white supremacists, many of the white people who became white supremacists, were fighting each other before they even encountered, according to everything I've read, people of color, and doing an excellent job of it. And so when they encountered the dark people of the planet, they said, this is a piece of cake. We have had so much practice fighting each other, they don't have an idea of even how to fight. They can't put up no fight. All these people of color, including all these people who call themselves Indians, they got feathers all over their head and whatnot, talking about they're training to be great warriors. They're not no warriors. They don't know nothing about war. We know about war. We're going to stomp on them like you wouldn't believe. They're not going to know what hit them. And they did that all over the world. The record shows that. The record that they made. And they brag about it. So in answer to the question, no, I don't get frustrated. That's part of the job. A real wrecking crew job has been done on black people. That's a done deal. If you're looking for anything, we're just looking at scraps now of people that could have been something. Maybe I've heard they were something at one time, but that was so long ago it's not even worth mentioning.
Alrighty. All right, thank you, Mr. Fuller. Okay, 516-453-9921 is the number. Make sure you depress the number 1 button and make sure you give your name to the call screener so we can get you on, as we are going to do right now with Toussaint from Brooklyn. Wait a minute, let me get you up here, Toussaint. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Okay, Toussaint, are you on? Okay,
yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Bobby.
Okay, yeah,
good morning, Mr.
Go.
Fuller.
All right, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning, good morning. I had a question. In New York, we tend to see a lot of nannies, whether they be Jamaican or, but they're non-white. We tend to see a lot of black nannies with white children. And my friend asked me a great question the other day, and I kind of didn't really know how to answer it. But I wanted to know, do you think that having black nannies take care of white children can potentially make those white children less racist? And what is the correlation with slavery?
Well, if that would happen, that would have happened a long time ago. So I'll just go by what the evidence shows. The evidence shows that had no effect at all. That actually it might have made white supremacists stronger. I mean, because a white person says, "Oh yeah, I've had black people carry my bags. I mean, a black nanny raised me. I mean, and watched over me and whatnot. But she was my servant and the servant of my progeny, the people that came before me, my parents. And they carried, if I go on a safari, I mean, they carried things, all of my belongings on their heads, which is all their heads are good for, carrying my belongings. And they don't have anything in their heads. They don't know what to do with what they have in their heads. And they have shown a long record of that. I use my brain. I mean, they act like they don't have a brain and don't want to use the one that they're told that they have. And if you want to teach them anything that makes sense, they run from you. They drop out of school, I mean, like flies, I mean, want to hit the streets. I mean, they've always been this way. They're animals. I mean, you have to treat them that way. You get a whip and whip them, make them do what you want done, because they don't know what to do themselves, no way. I mean, they're just wasting God's time, walking around, bumping into each other, making a whole lot of noise. They think jumping up and down and making a lot of noise is the greatest thing that a person can do. But a white person has to come and knock their heads together to make them do anything for 5 minutes that makes sense. So, no, I mean, having nannies and chogi bearers and just bootlickers and shoe shines, that's what they're good for. That's all they ever will be good for. It just ain't in them. Now, this is white supremacist doctrine, as far back as I can remember. I thought about it, and I said, well, it looks like it's true, but then I started seeing so many exceptions. Mm-hmm. And then I said, oh, no, this has just been put in people's heads over a long period of time, and it's ingrained. And, if it was put there, it can be removed. That's not, you can. And I've seen examples of people who can be taught, who were black, okay? Lots of them. So I said, no, this, when people tell you this is impossible for you to learn, and that's all you've ever heard since the time you were born, you won't learn. That's all you ever hear. You don't even make an effort. You say, I'm black. I mean, what do you expect me to know? You expect me to know anything that's worth anything? Anything that's worth knowing? Look at my black skin. I mean, I don't have a brain that works. I mean, better bring somebody white around if you're going to talk real business. I don't know anything about that. Can't learn. impossible for me to do it.
All righty. Thank you, Toussaint from Brooklyn. Thank you very much, and don't be a stranger. Let's continue with Courtney. Oh, wait a minute, Courtney. Okay, whoops. Let's continue with Courtney from the Bronx. Go ahead, Courtney. You're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning, gentlemen. Question here. I've heard Mr. Neely Fuller said before police officers, I think, don't exist, or in order to be a police officer, you have to practice justice. So in the word guide on page 290, it says, use this to apply to any person and or any force that guarantees that no person is mistreated and that guarantees that the person who needs help the most gets the most help. But I've also heard Mr. Fuller said a police officer is a person who has the correct intention. So I was kind of confused on the word police officer, police. Is it like police officers do not exist, or if I understand, if you could elaborate further on that for me, please.
Mr. Fuller?
Police, you have law enforcement officers. A police officer actually practices justice. That's why I prefer to use the word law enforcement officers. Now, you have law enforcement officers who just try to enforce the law in such a manner that nobody's mistreated. In my opinion, great numbers. I can't say the majority or the minority or anything about numbers, because I may not know what I'm talking about, so I don't venture that far. But I say huge numbers, I believe, has been my experience and my observation, to try to do the best they can to do the correct thing. But in the system of white supremacy, up under everything that they are taught, there is the underlying force of the system of white supremacy. Every law enforcement officer on the planet, whether they're white or non-white, they are subtly being taught that, hey, you support what is in place already, buddy. I mean, so what is in place already? What is the strongest government on the planet? You're supposed to be enforcing governmental law over all people. If you're a law enforcement officer, that's what you sign up for. So we don't teach you this in police school, but governmental law. And you're going to support the laws of the government? Well, what government do you have in place? It's only one government on the planet. That is the system of white supremacy. So every law enforcement officer gets that message directly or indirectly, even though that's not taught in, well, I won't say in any school, but certainly here in 2021, throughout the planet, when you start talking about law enforcement, nobody's going to say you enforce the laws that will help to make the system of white supremacy stronger. But everyone who is taught anything in any school is supposed to understand that any move that you make is supposed to help the system of white supremacy stronger. Why? Because that's the only real law on planet Earth that really counts. All of the laws that non-white people make, they're just secondary, third, 15th place, all like that. But the ones that the white supremacists make, they stick. That's the supreme law, the supreme law of every land on the planet here in 2021. That's why the race issue is the most volatile issue on the entire planet, the most volatile. People talk about this type of ism, that type of ism, that type of religion, this type of religion. There's no religion stronger than the religion of white supremacy. None. All of them put together don't have the muscles that the white supremacists have.
All righty. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Fuller. Thank you for your answer. Let's go right here to Philly, and that would be Stan. Stan from Philly, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Yes, sir. Good morning, gentlemen. Just a quick statement, and then I'll go to the question. That the email you got about being discouraged, I appreciate your explanation on that, because I feel the same way, but I would say that, like, people will say negative things about black people, and I would just say that you cannot judge black people in America until you understand the complete and total history of black people in America. And that's just always been a problem, is that most people don't have an understanding of why things are the way they are. So I appreciated your explanation on not being discouraged. But the question that I had was, it's online on YouTube. It's a short video that's done by, I don't know, it's called On the Shoulders of Giants. On the Shoulders of Giants. I don't know who does that, but it's a 6-minute video of yourself, Mr. Fuller, Dr. Welson, and Joy DeGroy. And Dr. Welson is speaking about how you and her met. And I'm sure you've spoken about that before. But the question I have is, I'm sure that you shared your book or your theory of white supremacy with numerous people over the years prior to meeting her. But what was it about her that made her different, that made her be able to take your message or your teachings further? And I would just like to stay on the line and hear the comment.
All righty.
Answer.
Okay, go ahead. Mr. Fuller?
Oh, it wasn't anything that I did. It was that most people that I was talking about a code would not, up until I met Dr. Welson, most of the people that I would talk to would just kind of look at me with curiosity. They'd listen to me and they'd say, yeah, okay, well, yeah, that sounds good, brother. I mean, go forth with it. I mean, it sounds like you got some pretty good ideas there. Yeah. And then that would be it. That would be their response. And then some people would say, oh, no, brother, what we got to have now, we got to have some, I mean, we got to do this, we got to do that. I mean, we got to, first thing we got to do is we got to get an army and a navy, and that's what we need. We got to get some ships, and we got to get some airplanes. I mean, because that's the way to go. And then somebody would say, well, no, what we got to do is we got to organize at the economic level. I mean, and we got to open up more black businesses and whatnot. I said, well, we've tried a lot of that, and I would say that what we need is a code. And people just looked at me baffled. And they say, well, yeah, okay. Well, they wouldn't disagree, but I could tell that they were listening and not listening. And it wasn't frustrating to me. It was just that I was trying to find my way. So I was saying, well, maybe they're correct, but I don't think so, because just about everything has been tried. But I've seen that the white supremacists, even when it's just a handful of them, how is it that they're so like magic, that they do things in such a methodical way? And so method, when you do things in a methodical way, that's a code of some type. I said they have a code that they don't even have to talk about. It's just understood. It's ingrained that I'm a white person. And as a white person, when I go here and go there and do this and do that, I have a code that I follow. And I don't have to speak to anybody. I don't have to put my arms around anybody. I don't have to chant nothing. I don't have to dance around a fire. I have a code. And just one or two of us can go among the dark people anywhere. We can arrive at 9 o'clock in the morning, and by 5 o'clock that evening, we have them doing everything that we want them to do, and they have us doing nothing. And so I figured out, you have to have a code to do that. I mean, a real strong code. but I couldn't get anybody to understand that. But Dr. Wilson caught on to it. She said, "Oh, now I see what you're talking about." Like it was a eureka moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hang on there, Mr. Fuller. Hang on there, and we'll come back to that. When we come back, as we take this station break, we're going to have Mr. Fuller finish with his introduction to Dr. Welsing, and then we'll have a Gmail, and then we'll go to a couple of more calls. You're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. and co-host Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show, all you need to do is dial this number, 516-453-9921, and make sure that you depress the number 1 button so that you can get in line. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. And if you would like, you could join the conversation that is ongoing in the chat room here. Okay. So thank you for listening. If you have to go, don't go. But if you have to go, you have to go. But hang in there for more of the Counter Racist Code Show, CRCS, with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Okay, Mr. Fuller, finish up there with your meeting with Dr. Welsing, something that she caught a hold to. She had a eureka moment, and you want to continue that conversation before we move on?
Well, then we started having meetings. I mean, and I was trying, I wasn't aware that of anything called a code. I was just started paying attention. I said, they got a set way of doing everything. Is this things, a list of things? I think, and I came to the conclusion, and I don't know whether that's accurate or not, I said about time the average white person is 15 years old. They'll make mistakes even after they're 15. I mean, the white supremacists make mistakes now. I mean, even when they're way up in age, but they make very few. And I said, why is this? It's because they have a code that's mistake-proof. And what is a code? What is this code you keep talking about, Fuller? A way of going about doing everything. Certain things you do, certain things you don't do.
Mm-hmm.
Certain things you will do sometimes, maybe. And you'll know exactly what those things are. And the sometimes that you will do them. I mean, it looks like you're doing something contradictory to the code. But that's a part of the code that they do. Because the white supremacists are so skilled at codification, they know how to take both sides of every argument and make it work for them. Or every side of every argument. If it's more than two sides, it can be 3 or 4 sides. They know how to take all the sides. So they wind up with all the power, regardless of which way anybody goes. They know how to do that. They are the greatest actors and actresses in recorded history.
Mm-hmm.
Because in order to do what they do, they have to fool people.
Yes.
And so what do people do when they get on the stage and they say that, now I'm going to play a period piece, they call it. Now this is in the 1700s. And the way that they will go about doing it as actors and actresses, it will look believable. And then they say, well, I'm going to make a movie showing, how the Martians act. And they will act like what they say the Martians would, if there's anything called Martians, how the Martians act. Actors, actresses, like on a stage. So they are excellent at doing that. They're the best in the world. I mean, so they have a code for doing that, making impressions. Now, this is the type of black person we're going to be dealing with today. So when that black person comes in, he's going to be all belligerent and whatnot, and he's going to be cursing and using all his slangs and all like that. So we're going to use Code A to handle it. because it always works.
Always works.
The white supremacists do not do anything unless it works. That's something that black people have not learned yet, even when it comes to getting pulled over. We don't have a code.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Fuller, and thank you, Stan from Philly. And I'm going to keep you on the line here. I have a question here. This is from Mr. Duncan. He says, Mr. Fuller, it's a three-part question, but I'll try to condense this. It says, Mr. Fuller, please define the confusion according to compensatory logic. How has confusion played a role in the 9 areas of activity and the agenda of white supremacy? And what is the best constructive response to eliminate confusion and dysfunction?
What has always eliminated confusion since the beginning of what we call time and existence? What eliminates confusion? That's the question. Remember, counter-racist codification, just like any codification, is based on logic. So logically speaking, what eliminates confusion in anything? If I'm trying to figure out how to operate a can opener, and I've never seen a can opener before, what eliminates confusion? Somebody, first of all, tells me, they give me information. That's what eliminates confusion. Information. You get information. 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 Be informed. First of all, somebody will tell you, this is a can opener. And you'll say, what's a can? All right, because you're confused. So someone will show you a can and probably show you how to open the can with the can opener. Now, that's information. You saw them do it, and then they'll have you do it. That's information. Now you are informed about what a can is and what a can opener is. Why? Because you have done it. Now, the white supremacists understand that. But black people think that to eliminate confusion, all you have to do is scratch your head. That's why there are, I guess, thousands of cartoons of the black person with a great big head, and that finger is on top of that head, scratching it, trying to make the brain work. And what is the brain working to do? Eliminate confusion. That doesn't work. You use your eyes and use what's inside your brain, because your brain is supposed to be already geared up to work. But you use your eyes or you use your ears. You use what you got, your other senses, to eliminate confusion. I mean, you have a thing called the sense of smell. So you say, I smell smoke. So you're a little bit confused. Is that chicken cooking or what? And then you say, no, that's the basement is on fire. That's wood burning. Okay? Now, what are you doing? Your brain is working. You're eliminating confusion. That's all it is. But when you explain that to somebody in words, black people don't seem to understand that. I mean, we do it all day long. Which bus do you catch? You're eliminating confusion by doing what? Getting information. All problems are solved through the process of what? Questions and answers.
Mm-hmm.
All problems in the universe are, you eliminate confusion by initiating questions and answers. But black people like to walk around acting like they know everything right out of the womb. Whereas the white supremacists say, I'm always learning.
Yeah.
That's why I'm powerful. The Negro don't want to learn nothing, because he wants to walk up and down the street talking loud, acting like he knows everything. And we know that he doesn't know nothing. Keep him that way.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Let's go to, we're going to the Bronx. Boy, New York is really in the house today. But right now we have George. Thank you, George. I tried to get to you last week, but I couldn't. But anyway, thank you for calling back. Go ahead, George. What is your question for Mr. Fuller? George? Wait a minute. Okay.
Sorry, I was on mute, Mr. Bobby.
Okay, there you go. George? Yeah.
Yes. It is June 1st, the first day of Gay Pride Month, and across the country we're going to start to see promotion of LGBT pride and just different sexualities, and that led me to think of the concept of counter-racist sexuality. I wanted Mr. Fuller, if he could, to go deeper into this concept, if he thought of any new ways to promote this concept or just get this idea across to black people, because I feel like now more than ever we do need to be codified in the realm of sexuality. So if he could tell us about this or refresh us, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Fuller?
Well, I tried to explain it over and over again, and I don't know if it's taking root or not. I don't know if people even care. I mean, it seems like we don't. Like black people don't much care about anything really that matters. I mean, but we make a big fuss over something that doesn't matter. That's our history, and I understand it. But it's obvious to me that the white supremacists are using sexual confusion as one of the main things that they're doing here in 2021 and have for the last, I'll say, 30 years or so. They have geared up. They have looked at all the areas of activity, like it says in the textbook: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, and war. And they have looked at the eighth area of activity, like it's segmented in the textbook for victims of white supremacy, which is sex. And I've talked about it at great length in the textbook. What they're doing, they're causing sexual confusion, okay? Because if you want to dominate people, you got to keep them confused. So the white supremacists geared up, starting, I'll say, roughly about 40 years ago in earnest. And they really got it cranked up now. And it's acceptable to a couple of generations, so everybody's just falling in line behind it. I mean, like robots. And the white supremacists are saying, you know, this thing about this male and female, that's so backward. That's so primitive. I mean, you people are just so backward. Why don't you do something with your brain? What you need is, you need a variety in your sexuality. That's your biggest problem. You don't have enough variety. You have sexual power. Everybody knows that black people are very strong sexually, but you don't know how to use it. So you have so much of this sexual power, this sexual energy among you black people. You need to disperse it. Now, let's see. Now, how would that go about doing that? Well, you kind of like, just do something different. And you say, different like what? I got my gal, and, that's what we call ourselves in the song, Porgy and Bess and whatnot. I got my song, got my gal. I don't need much else, that. Hey, as far as, once I get my girl, everything else falls in place. I look forward all my life, building that up and maybe starting a family, and having some children. Forget that. See, that's what I keep saying about you people. You're so primitive. You're so backward. What you need is to disperse your sexuality. Try some new things. Have you ever thought about turning into a girl? You don't have to be a male. Now that you're showing your maleness and you say you want to grow up and I am a man, you're walking around with a sign and all like that. That's limited. That's so backward. What you need to do is, look at your sisters and decide that you want to be your sister. All right? You want to skip around in a dress and whatnot. march them down the street, and drop your pants and show your rear end. And tell people that that's a vagina. That's what you need to do. You uncivilized people. We're trying to give you the greater parts, the more refined parts of civilization. Pucker up your lips around a phallus. Have somebody put their phallus in your mouth. Try that. You people, you always say you want to do something different. Well, that's different. And boy, have they pulled that off. And we are going for it hook, line, and sinker. Because the white supremacists who think way ahead, they say, one thing we can do, we can use it. We may not be able to keep them dispersed sexually, but since sex is so powerful, people walk around thinking about sex at a subtle level all day long. If we can steer them in any way we want them to go sexually, it'll be real easy to steer them in other areas of activity, in economics, in education, in entertainment, because sexually, that will be their priority, because it is everybody's priority ultimately. If people are sexually strong, all right? So if we steer them in the area of sex, it'll be real easy to steer them in the area of economics. We can have them engage in any kind of dispersal economics, any kind of dispersal education. Education won't amount to very much because they're just thinking about chasing each other's rear end, all the black males, all right, as the mecca of everything. And so that's what we'll have them doing. And so it will be a diversion, really. That's why we call it diversity, okay? So that's really what that's all about, in my opinion, and according to all the evidence. And it has drawn in black people because we're always looking for something new. We're so starved for attention. We're starved for everything, food, clothing, shelter. So just anything that looks like it's different from what we have been doing, and then white supremacists can very easily just dump it on us and say it's an improvement.
Okay. Thank you, George. And don't be a stranger to this program, although strangers are welcome, and call back. All right, Mr. Fuller, this is the time where we discuss your publication, your book. So, Mr. Fuller, for the next few minutes, let's discuss what we've been talking about in your book.
Yes. Well, that's what the book talks about in answer to the previous caller's question. First thing you do if you want to have some different level of thoughts, you go to the textbook for the victims of white supremacy and look at the 8th area, sex. I say a whole lot about that, of what I was asked about just a moment ago. The sexual scrambling. I got all kinds of names for it because that's what it is. But it just comes down to adding to what? Confusion. Because if you can confuse people in any area of activity, you can dominate them. As long as you can keep somebody confused, confusion means they're helpless. They can't figure out what's going on. So they'll come to someone who is what? Not confused. So therefore, the person who is not confused is always, in every situation, the most powerful person. And so the textbook is about that. The white supremacists have confused the non-white people of the entire planet in such a manner they got them eating out of their hand. And the hand is full of poison food. And we don't even know it. And so the textbook for victims of white supremacy, which is what the non-white people of the planet are, whether they realize it or not, they come under the system of white supremacy, is to counteract on a daily basis what they have put together on a daily basis over a period of time. And we can do it in record time. we need a code for doing it, and that's what the code book I'm trying to start. People have asked me, Fuller, where's the whole code? That's what I need. And I say there's no such thing as a whole code until all problems are solved. A code is nothing but a problem-solving agency. So you solve as many problems as you can until there are no more problems to solve. That's it. And so these are just suggestions of how to solve the race problem, because you can't solve any other problem until you solve the major problem on the planet, and that is this thing called the race problem, this monster that has been, this Frankenstein that has been produced by those white people who have decided to produce this Frankenstein called white supremacy. Mm-hmm. So you can get the book by going to producejustice.com and get some ideas about codification, how to codify yourself as an individual person, so you know what to say, know what to do, know what to not do in every situation, in every area of activity. Some suggestions. Okay. Go to producejustice.com.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Fuller. Okay, let's do this here. Going back to the let's go to the Gmails. This is from this is from Alpha saying, are black people humans under the system of white supremacy? Mr. Fuller, recently, Mr. Fuller, Eric Boykins, a black man in Mississippi, was quote, literally, end of quote, hunted down by several police agencies after allegedly robbing a bank. When he was caught, four suspected race soldiers took a picture with him posting with hound dogs, hunting hats, and with Mr. Boykins, quote, smiling, end of quote. Many black people are upset over this picture because it appears to show the police were on a hunting trip to catch a, quote, wild black man, end of quote. On page 267 of the original code for victims of white supremacy, the code talks about, quote, human beings, human race, and human rights. Are black people humans under white supremacy? I ask, Mr. Fuller, because black people said that Mr. Boykins, quote, human rights, end of quote, were violated, that he was not treated like a human being, and that is not how you treat someone of the human race. I'm confused. I do not see black people being treated like human beings or having human rights, and I'm not sure what is the human race. Mr. Fuller, can you clear up the question, are black people humans under the system of white supremacy?
Well,
now go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, is that the question?
Yeah. And it's in the original book, the 1984 edition.
And the question is, are black people human?
Yeah,
in the system of white supremacy.
Under the system of white supremacy, yes.
The answer is no. People are not human, and white people aren't either. What does human mean according to the code? See, according to codification, you have to have your own definition for terms that reveal what? That reveal the truth. So it's a lot of what you call words in the English language that don't reveal truth. They cause more confusion. The use of the words, like the word America. I've heard it said right this morning on this program. I mean, the word America. And I have talked about it and talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. There's no such thing as a people or a place that are Americans. It doesn't exist. That's an idea. But it doesn't exist in reality. But we talk about it like it's a reality. And we won't stop doing it. And the code keeps saying, what's the definition? What's the definition? What's the definition? It's the same thing with human being. A human being is humane. Now, in order to qualify to be humane, you have to have what? You have to have justice. And what is justice? You have to have a definition for justice. Justice is guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. So therefore, by those definitions, you cannot have human beings in a system of white supremacy. It's absolutely impossible. Why? Because you don't have justice. People are not treated humanely. Humanity is about justice. You have to have justice in order to have humanity, or have to have humane treatment of anybody. You have to have justice. Justice, I must say it again, a compensatory definition, one that I made up. It's in the textbook, and I think it'll stand the test of time. I haven't heard anyone come up with anything better. I came up with it in 1994. Justice is guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. That doesn't exist anywhere on the planet. And an American is a person that practices justice. So since you don't have anybody practicing justice in the system of white supremacy, which is the only government on the planet worth of being called a government, then you don't have justice. And if you don't have justice, you don't have Americans. And you don't have human beings. You don't have people treating each other humanely. It ain't going to happen in the system of white supremacy, even when it looks like it's happening, it's not happening, because it's within it's in the most corrupt system for corrupting humanity and for completely eliminating justice. If you want to use that difference between the two words, humanity and justice, because humanity would have to lead to the word justice. You don't have justice, so you don't have any human beings. Period. The white supremacists are not humane. You can't be a racist and be humane. There's no humanity in you. It's not there. And you can't be a victim of racism and be humane, because it's not there. You're not in a humane system, the system of white supremacy, the only government on the planet. There is no other government. There's no American government in the system of white supremacy. That's a contradiction. Why? Because what is America? What is an American? I'm going to say it again for the umpteenth millionth time. An American is a person that practices justice. And you can't practice justice in the system of white supremacy. Therefore, by logic and by definition, it's impossible to be an American in the system of white supremacy. Or, for that matter, an African or an Asian. You can't be any one of those three things in the system of white supremacy.
All righty.
Why? Because these three words, the three A's, African, American, and Asian, mean people who practice justice. It's impossible to practice justice in the system of white supremacy. It ain't going to ever happen.
Okay. We're going to have to leave it there, Mr. Fuller, for the first hour. So we have come to the conclusion of the first hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, here heard on Blog Talk. If you have to go, thank you for listening. If you called in, thank you for your calls. However, for those who are still with us, we have another hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. You know the details, but I'll talk to you on the other side in about 10 seconds. Thank you for listening. All righty. Welcome back to the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show, just simply call 516-453-9921 and depress the number 1 button so that you can get in line so that Mr. Fuller may address your call. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. Now, it generally will not be read on the day that you send it to me, but at some point in time, it will be read, as I have been reading some of the Gmails that are stacked up right now. As soon as we can get them in, as time permits, we will read them. You can also go into the chat room, and there's some interesting things that are in the chat room. You can get on there and chat if you would like to, but those are the ways to do that. Again, 516-453-9921 is the number that you call to get on the program if that's what you would like to do, and you can do that. I'll tell you what we're going to do here. Let's go to my brother. Let's see. Okay, Brother Muko is not on here, but let's go to Swa. Let's see. Swa, I know you say that you're listening. There you go. Let's see. Swa, did you have a question for Mr. Fuller this morning?
Yes. So, good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
I've concluded that white people and the most powerful white people and their various organizations, whether it's the CIA or the FBI or any so-called government agency, I've been doing a lot of reading, particularly the book called Program to Kill. I bought the book Race Code War. And those books really shared some constructive information on just what white people are doing and how they function. And do you think, Mr. Neely Fuller, that if more non-white, particularly black people, understood that we are dealing with an enemy that is a master pedophile, master rapist, and master mass murderer, do you think that would encourage more people to want to counter racism, or would that cause more fear and hesitancy in wanting to counter racism and solve the problem?
Well, maybe I don't understand the question.
Yeah, let me attempt to rephrase it. But if more non-white people knew what white people were doing, whether it's the mass murdering, the mass mind control, the mass rape of children and so-called adults, if more non-white people were aware of white people's behaviors, do you think that would make them want to attempt to counter racism, or would that produce more fear and hesitancy and wanting to solve the problem?
It will probably do both, but it's a necessity. I look at myself. Once I concluded that everything is being run that's worth anything is run by the white supremacists, and that they are running it in such a way that they are mistreating people by the millions based on color, which is what white supremacy is about, mistreating people based on color, dominating and mistreating people based on color in order to gain what? People do things for gains. So what do the white supremacists get out of dominating and mistreating people based on color? They get the things that all people want. in one form or another. This is what all people want. 3 things: fun, glory, and material comfort. And presumably, according to the evidence, some white people classified themselves as white, said that we're going to dominate the entire planet of non-white people based on the color of their skin, black, brown, red, yellow, tan. I mean, as long as they got color in their skin, they will be subject to everyone that we will classify. They'll do the classifying as white. And what we'll get out of it, because we're not doing it just to be doing something, we're going to get what everybody wants in one form or another, and that is lots of fun, lots of glory, meaning being well thought of, looked up to, worship maybe, and we'll get material comfort, a whole lot of nice things out of having them do what we want them to do when we want them to do it. Having them work. We'll have what we call, the system itself will be basically the most successful system that you can have, where you put forth the least effort, and that is a thing called slavery. We'll call it by different names. Some people will call it capitalism. Some people will call it communism. Some people will call it this type of ism, that type of ism. But it'll basically be racism. It's a form of slavery. That's all racism is. And we get fun, glory, and profit. So in answer to your question, once we see what the white supremacists are doing and how that system works, it will make us afraid initially. I'm full of fear, all right? But at the same time, I'm saying I'm born in a prison called the system of white supremacy. So what do I do in a prison? I do what every prisoner does. If I'm trying to make sense to myself, trying to get some type of sanity, and that is try not to be a prisoner. So every prisoner, every person who is locked up in any kind of system unjustly should be thinking about, the main thing they should be thinking about, I'm in this prison, I shouldn't be here, there's no reason for me to be here, I should be somewhere doing something else other than being a prisoner. So I'm going to try to either get out of this prison or eliminate the prison. So counter-racist codification is about eliminating the prison, because the prison never should have existed in the first place. And when you eliminate it for what reason? To replace it. Replace it with what? With something that's not a prison system. And the system of white supremacy needs to be replaced. Replaced with what? A system of justice, logically speaking. So yes, you'll have fears. You're supposed to have fears. The system of white supremacy is something that's scary. So you'll be afraid, but fear is made to be conquered. By what? What brings about fear? Not knowing what to do. So how do you eliminate not knowing what to do? Finding out what to do. That's logical. You don't fear fire when you know what to do about fire. You don't fear water if you fall in it and you know how to swim. But the person that falls in water and don't know how to swim, you better believe fear grips them immediately. Immediately. They fell in the water, so they want somebody who knows how to swim. The person that knows how to swim does not fear the water, even though they should have regard for the water, because water acts different ways at different times. And here with this summer coming up, somebody's going to get drowned because they're not going to know what a riptide is. It's going to happen. The person is not going to have any fear, but that fear is going to grip them when they find themselves caught in that riptide, if they never found out what a riptide is.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Well, let's go to Long Beach, and we have Marcus. There you are. Marcus, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question, please?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning.
Within the last, I would say a week and a half, in the NBA playoffs, we've had some fans, completely acting outlandish. The first incident was, a young white fan throwing popcorn on the basketball player Russell Westbrook. He has been hit with a lifetime ban of the sport. The next incident was another young white fan spitting on the player Trae Young on his back. And then one of the bigger ones that caught more national attention was the young white fan in Boston who threw a bottle of water at Kyrie Irving, who doesn't have too much of good history. He was a former player in Boston, left on whatever terms weren't too good, but the fans have some animosity about that, as do other guys. But the fan ended up throwing a bottle of water at him, and then the news and all the articles that came out are saying that the young white fan is now being hit with a felony and battery charge, a felony assault and battery charge, excuse me.
Yes, assault.
So, my question is, do you think that these young white fans that are doing this to these black players, because I haven't seen them doing it to any other players, and I watch a lot of the games, they're doing this mistreatment to these grown black men as an underlying cause of racism? Because that's what I think it is. So do you think that's what it could be?
If the person is a racist, yes. Everything that a racist does is about racism. I mean, racism is a wonderful thing if you're a racist, because there's so many benefits. I mean, when you're told that, hey, if you're around a whole bunch of people that got color in their skin, you are superior. You are supreme. Act like it. Think like it. Talk like it. Do things for your convenience, not for theirs. Everything that you do is for you. And they have nothing to say about it. This is what a white supremacist learns. That's what supreme means. You are their God. You a bunch of around a whole bunch of people that got color in their skin, and you look at yourself and you discover that you are white. That means that all of these people are supposed to bow down to you. Oh, la, la, la. Oh, great white God. Oh, 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 oh. And who are they? That's who they are. And if you're black, you're an animal. Animals bow down to people. That's why people shoot rhinos and stand there and put their foot on the rhino's neck after the rhino is dead and get their picture taken, holding up a rifle. White man, rifle, dead rhino, also dead Negro, dead anybody with color in their skin in the form of a person. Fun, glory. That's what it's all about. So throwing bottles at black people and all like that, hey, that's what you do with animals. Throw things at them. Get that rat out of here. Tired of looking at it. Can't stand to see it.
All righty. Thank you, Marcus from Long Beach.
Thank you. I'd like to stay on the line, too.
Okay. Yeah, I can click you off. Okay. Let me see, get you there. Okay, all righty. Mr. Fuller, this comes from M, whoever that is, Miss M. I think I know who it is. But anyway, Mr. Fuller, are non-white people who knowingly or unknowingly participate in the system of white supremacy, are they white supremacists themselves?
Non-white people can't be white. No. In answer to the question, no. You're victims of white supremacy. If you're born with color in your skin on the planet Earth, and even before you're born, because you're carried for 9 months, that's under normal conditions, you are a prisoner of war. So you're born in captivity. Why? Because there's no other government on the planet worthy of being called a government other than the system of white supremacy. The system of white supremacy. The system of white supremacy. You put it in capital letters, not in small letters. The system of white supremacy. Recently, people have been trying to shortcut it by saying systemic racism. Call it by its full title, the system of white supremacy. That's what we're saying. See, they're trying to ease away from it with that systemic racism, which means what? You took the white out of it. See, the white supremacists, you've got to watch them with these words. They know how to use words. They are the masters of words. So they'll say, oh, yes, we have systemic racism. See, and then that's why they start off this week. By next week, they'll say, yeah, well, we have systemic racism among black people, too, you know. Black people are racist, all right? A black person snatched my wife's pocketbook, all right, and called her a name. Give me that money, you white, and the B word or something like that. See, and he called her by and said something about her color or her non-color. Called her a white bee, all right, when he snatched the purse and he ran. Okay, and these people are evil. But where did he learn to snatch purses? Okay. He wasn't born snatching purses. He wound up in that kind of condition because of what? A system that's designed to make him into a thief. By the time he drops out of school, 9th grade, that's the next stop. Thievery, robbery, drive-by shootings. By the time he's 22 years old, he's got a record a mile long. Which means what? According to the white supremacist law, he's tagged forever. He's always got that badge on him now. And they say, well, hey, buddy, we can't hire you here. Boy, your record is staggering. You can't work here. Well, where am I going to work? Well, I don't know. Not here. So he's told that everywhere. And so, he dropped out of school at, 15? Age 22? Funeral. But the black male, they're already dead. 15 years old, you're looking at a walking dead person. A lot of black females got to understand that. You got a black male child, he just dropped out of school, start getting ready for his funeral. That's how they have it planned. Buy your balloons in advance. You're going to need them. You got 3 of them, 3 boys. All of them now talking about, they can't stand it no more. They're not learning nothing in that school where they're going to. There ain't nothing but chaos there. Even the teacher doesn't know what he's talking about. And when he does talk, he ain't talking about nothing that's relates to him. So he ain't learning nothing. He ain't making no money. He's hungry. Where's the daddy? Oh, who's that? Who is that? You talking about black people? Got a daddy? Might have one that adopted him. He's white.
516-453-9921 is the number to get in contact with the show with a question or quick comment. Let's go to Miss Diva 2. It says, Mr. Fuller, hello, Mr. Fuller, people always say we should be thankful for what we have because there is always someone worse off than you. Do you find that this belief harms black people because black people love to show off to other black people who may not have what they have?
That is the greatest weakness, according to the code and evidence, of the black people of this entire planet, no matter where you go. That great urge, that great need to show off. Show off to whom? For the black people. Stop and think, and then take a look. Am I telling the truth? More than anything, black people want to, they look forward. Bling, bling, you name it. A song, a new song that we write. It's mostly geared, and hey, don't talk about hair. Oh, I mean, that's not messages to the white people. White people can't stand it. I mean, they look away. My goodness, what in the heck is that? But we go to great length, just on the hair alone, to do what? Walk out of that salon or barber shop or whatever. Look at me. What do we mean by that? Who look at you? Who do you want to look at you? Look at you doing what? Look at you for what reason? What are you doing that warrants you to be looked at? But everything, we're so starved for attention. Throw a brick through a window just to get attention. Look at me. Look at me. Please, please, folks. Oh, look at me. And if nobody looks at you and whatnot, and you try, you get a blonde wig, and and people look at you all right. The white people run because they say, "What in the world is that?" These people don't have any blonde hair, but they got it now. Okay. So we mostly focus on hair, and if that doesn't work, then we try to get some diamonds, and that doesn't work, we try to put on something. I mean, and we actually look like we're trying out after we get through and walk away from the mirror. We look like we're trying out for a part in a circus, and we're not even aware of that. But what is it for? To get attention. Attention from whom? From other black people. Now, when you get the attention, what is it worth? Do black people do we ask each other, ask ourselves, when you get the attention of another black person, what is that attention worth? Well, they paying me some attention. I've never been paid attention. My daddy didn't pay me no attention. My mama, she's working 2 jobs. She didn't pay me no attention. It was 8 of us. I didn't never get no attention at all. And sometimes because I didn't get no attention, I didn't even get no food. The other children ate up all the food. I got it. So I never had no attention. So I'm going to do something to get attention. I'm going to turn that car over or whatnot. I'm going to do anything. I'm going to stand in the middle of the street and yell to the top of my voice because somebody going to pay me some attention. In answer to the question that was just asked, yes, that's the priority of black people all over the world as we speak right now. And if you look at us and you look at yourself, ask yourself, what is your priority? Ultimately, everything that you're doing is to get the attention of other black people. We've been trained that way. Trained by whom? The white supremacists.
White supremacists. All right. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Let's go into Houston and believe it's John. John, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question this morning?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby, and good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning, sir.
Last week you said something to, I believe her name was Nicole. It was interesting, back and forth, starting off with the word blackball. But before I say what I have to say in activity of blackness or using that connotation. Yesterday was the alleged centennial of quote-unquote Black Wall Street and Greenwood, Oklahoma. What was interesting to me is not just the immediate manner in which the white media, as you said, Mr. Fuller, made repeated presentations, documentaries, long-form, representation by others about us. And money is being made off a museum that we're not building. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because the Centennial Commission itself of the alleged white community of Tulsa, Oklahoma, raised over $30 million, and not a penny went to a single survivor, which we know 3 went before the congressional record 2 weeks ago. And the point that I'm making here is not just that we are still benefiting the white supremacist system financially, psychologically, spiritually, and unfortunately with quote-unquote black bodies, which is why I want to stop here and trying difficult in my own manner of ending the use of that term, because anything black is attached to the connotation of whiteness or white supremacy. I'll say this in parting, whether you consider this a question or statement. As some people are finding out and realizing that the American, who we are the descendants and inheritance of, were the original population of people inhabiting this land, some may say referred to as Turtle Island, or what we call North America. I would suggest, that's just my perspective, that the use of the term America be reclaimed, defined, and made accurate to be only one specific group who has been taught and been called nigger, Negro, colored, black, and African American. When we start doing something in that line, we then disassociate ourselves from the term black or blackness. And maybe if you'll remember what you suggested to that lady last week about just one word, blackball. But it's a very hard thing to do, I think, in initiating turning around behavior if we can't start with control of narrative. And thank you for the time, Mr. Bobby. I'd like to stay on and listen to his response.
Okay. I'll tell you what we're going to do. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Fuller, go ahead. You have a response to that?
Well, that comes under VGQ. I didn't hear a question there. So.
No,
Well, I'll frame it this way as a specific question. In Noah Webster's Dictionary of 1828, the American was defined as the copper-colored races inhabiting this land encountered by European colonizers and invaders. So I would suggest in asking this question, who's the true American and everyone else is foreign? And therefore, when we reclaim that, we can distance ourselves from being identified as black and start dismantling white supremacy. So the question is, who is the American? And thank you again for the time.
Okay. Who is the American? Hang on, Mr. Fuller. I'm going to let you address John's question. Hang on there, John, after we take this short break. You are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. And I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show, just simply dial 516-453-9921 and make sure that you depress the number 1 button if you have a question so that we can get you on and Mr. Fuller can address that. Also, you can Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. And your question will not be read today, but it will be read at some point in time on another broadcast. And also, the chat room is open, and you could get on the chat room and have some comments there, and occasionally I will read some of the chats. But all that is right there available to you. So, again, you're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr., 516-453-9921. is the number. Okay, Mr. Fuller, addressing John's question, saying who are the Americans? Your response would be?
Americans are people who practice justice. That's my suggestion. That's a codified, compensatory, counter-racist suggestion. Nothing else. Nothing else. You don't think about mountains or waves of grain, or you think about people dressed a certain way. An American, an American, an American, an American, an American. I'm going to say it for the umpteenth millionth time, and it doesn't seem to stick anywhere for some strange reason. But logically speaking, what would an American be? What is an American? What makes a person an American? That's the question. You have to have a characteristic. What is the characteristic of an American? A characteristic that if you don't have that characteristic, you cannot be an American. Words should have definitions. A logical definition for an American. The only one is that it is a person. An American is a person that does what? Practices justice. An American is a person that practices justice. And what is justice? So we'll have clarity and no confusion for once in our lives, according to the code. An American is a person that practices justice. And what is justice? Justice is guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. If you are not a person who practices justice, you cannot be an American ever until you practice justice. You have to qualify that you guarantee that no person is mistreated. You got to guarantee that no person is being mistreated, and you got to guarantee that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Now, if you are not doing those two things, it's impossible to qualify for the title of American. And that also applies to two other prominent words, African and Asian. So an American, an African, and an Asian are all the same person, because all you have to do is qualify, and that's a huge qualification, for being an American or an African or an Asian by practicing justice. They all have the same definition. Otherwise, why have a definition at all? Why have those words at all? African, American, Asian. If you're not practicing justice, you can practice non-justice being anything. You don't even need a label. You're just a person that mistreats people, and you allow people to be mistreated. Now, since you don't have justice nowhere on the planet for the umpteenth time, according to the code, when you're talking to me at least, there's no such thing as an American or an African or an Asian, because the definition of that person is a person that guarantees that justice is being done. And since justice is not being done anywhere in the system of white supremacy on this planet called Earth, it's impossible to have an American or an African or an Asian on planet Earth in the system of white supremacy. That's the logical and the truthful equation. And I keep saying that in the textbook, all through the textbook. I say it on the air every week, and people come right behind it and start using the term American, and the term American is all over the place.
Yeah.
It's all over the place every week. It's weird. And I'm saying stop using that term in that context. Americans don't exist. It's an idea. And what is that idea? That idea is the concept of justice. And if you talk to a person who is supposed to be an Asian, you'll say, "Oh, do you believe in justice?" And the person says, "Yes." And they say, "Well, what do you call yourself?" "I call myself an Asian." "Well, do Asians believe in justice?" Say, yeah, some of them do. Well, wait a minute. Some of them do. What's the point in bragging about being an Asian and you don't do justice? That's a question. You don't do justice and you're bragging about being an Asian. Are you saying that an Asian doesn't do justice? Oh, no. I'm not saying that. Well, wait a minute. What's the point in being an Asian unless you're going to do justice? What is the point? That's a question. What's the point in being an American if you're not going to practice justice? Or you're not practicing justice? What's the point? You can mistreat people and be anything. You don't even need a name except mistreater. Because you're mistreating people, that's what you are. You ain't nothing else.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you for your call, John.
Goodness. Will we catch on to the use of words ever?
Let's go to Raymond. Raymond, you are on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Fuller. Good morning, Mr. Bobby. My question was on page 94 of the Revive on the economics. But Mr. Fuller teared up just now, so forget about the question.
Okay.
Teared up earlier. Yeah, he teared up earlier.
He cleared it up.
Do not use too much time and energy managing your hair. He teared right up, Mr. Bobby. He teared up.
Okay.
So my DGQ is, did you saw the video of the barber guy that the police in Louisiana, where they were pulling him on his face with a handcuff with his face down? That popped up recently.
I didn't see that, but yeah,
that
surprised me.
Yeah, there was a video of that guy, but I'm saying my BGQ is that if we still have the priority that we still have right now, with that video and George Floyd and everything else going on, it's still gonna continue. Cause I mean, we just have a different priority. That's just my VGQ. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Fuller tear page 94 just now. But do not use too much time and energy managing your hair. It teared right up. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you there, Raymond from Georgia. Let's go to the land of the rising sun. That would be Japan and Che. Che, you are on with Mr. Fuller in Japan, where it is what, 12:39 in the in the afternoon or whatever in Japan. Go ahead with your question.
Greetings, Mr. Bobby, Mr. Fuller. It's actually 11:40 now. 11:40 in the night.
PM?
Yes, PM, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I had a question in reference to something that I heard on last week's show, and I wanted a little bit of clarification. Mr. Fuller spoke of two books that I think it was sort of an ideal that these two books should appear in everyone's home. And he gave the compensatory suggested titles for those books, one of which was The Complete Historical Record of the System of White Supremacy. And this seems a departure from what I've heard Mr. Fuller express in the past regarding history, where it was more like, I think the sort of the analogy he gave was, you don't need to know the history of a car just to drive it. We're about functionality. And I thought he didn't place much value on history, but then he said this book, which was of utmost importance, was a complete historical record of the system of white supremacy. So I'm just asking Mr. Fuller for some clarification. What is the codified attitude towards history? How should we value it? Should we not value it so much? Or what's the codified stance regarding history?
Sometimes I don't make myself clear, evidently. I have always said history is extremely valuable. I don't know where that comes from. I hear things all the time. Sometimes people call on this program and say, well, now, Mr. Fuller, when you said this, and I never said no such thing in my entire existence. And so I'm wondering where I'm here, unless I'm saying things and don't know that I'm saying them. Maybe people can play the tape back, but I'm making huge mistakes. I hear it all the time. It's becoming more and more frequent. Things are attributed to me. That's why I try to write things down. So I say, wait a minute. Go to page such that this is what I'm saying. This is what I am saying. This is what I am saying. If I say something about America and whatnot, this is what I am saying. But I'll hear that I said this and I said that, and I don't want anybody to ever get the history as what? Knowing what happened. Something that happened 5 minutes ago. That's history. So it's real important to know what has happened. I would never be on record, I hope, ever, as saying that it's not important to know what has happened. That's a part of just breathing, knowing what has happened. You know that you got a job yesterday after not having a job for 6 months. So you went on a job yesterday, and they expect you to show up at the job today. And so yesterday is gone, so that happened. So you say, I do have a job, because I got a job yesterday. Before then, I didn't have a job. So I am due to go on a job today. You better remember that you got a job yesterday, or you're not going to have a job today. And yesterday is what? History. Why? Because it happened. It's something that happened. Anything that happens is history. You're born. You say you've been here X number of years. That happened. That's your history. You just, you say you have a birthday, and we recognize our birthdays, but I say you don't have but one birthday. That happened. You're born one time. Now, according to some religions, particularly the Christian religion, they say yes, but that's one type of birth. But you got to be born again if you're on this planet. You definitely got to be born again. But by the calendar clock, you're just born one time. And by the actuality, regardless of what the calendar says, your body is born one time. You don't have a birthday every calendar year. You say, today is my birthday. You're not born again every year. You have what they call a birthday, and then according to the code, you have breath days. You took that first breath on that birthday. That's your birthday. You took a first breath at some time or another. All the evidence shows that. You had a first breath. So that was your breathday, your birthday. And then you have many, many birthdays after that, hopefully. And then you have what? A death day. Use language accurately. That's what codification is about.
All righty. Mr. Fuller, we have about 14 minutes and 19 seconds left in the show, but this is the time that we designate for you to speak about your book. So take it away, Mr. Fuller.
Yes. And the book, here again, since we're talking about history, is based on things that have happened, and are happening now. And that is the biggest show on earth, the biggest government on earth, the strongest religion on earth. And what is that? The system of white supremacy. What it is, a record that I have written briefly, a somewhat record of what white supremacy is and how it works. I put down on paper some of the things about the system of white supremacy, just some, just scratching the surface of what it is and how it works in all areas of activity. A sort of summary, you might say. That's what the book is. I can't say about everything that's happened in the system of white supremacy. That book would go on and on and on. Yeah. All around the world, I mean, umpteen thousands of times. But I tried to do in one book, explain the basics of what white supremacy is and how it works in 9 areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And then, in the same book, I say what each individual person can do about it. Because I came to the conclusion that the white supremacists they chop an organization up in a minute. People say black people in a prison called the system of white supremacy think they can organize. And I've seen that the organization is going to be a failure. I've seen that happen over and over again. You spend all your time trying to organize, and then fights break out in the organization and everything falls apart because the white supremacists know how to start the fights in the organization. So they laugh at that. But when you organize a person around a code, the person adapts a code. The white supremacist says, I'm looking for the leader of your organization. But when the leader of the code is looked for, what does the white supremacist find? There is no leader except each individual person who is a victim of white supremacy, who is leading him or herself. And that is deadly to the system of white supremacy. That's the theory. It's yet to be proven, but I think it's the only thing that will work because nothing else has worked. When you organize each individual person and organize each individual person by doing what? That person has a code. Things that you do, things that you don't do, things that you say, things that you don't say, in every circumstance that you can think of. And make sure that what is said or done works. Then the white supremacists cannot defeat that. And that's what I've tried to write. The beginning of a code. That's why they're successful, because every white supremacist has a code. That's why they're successful at what they do as white supremacists. So you can get the textbook for victims of white supremacy, for their codification to help you become codified, by going to producejustice.com.
Okay.
That's producejustice.com.
All right, producejustice.com. Okay, question here, Mr. Fuller. It says, Mr. Fuller, this comes from an anonymous person. Mr. Fuller, if President Biden wanted to meet with you to discuss racism, would you meet with him to do that?
If he asked,
yeah.
The only thing I could bring is the Codebook, and he could very well, without even talking to me, he could just read what I say that I would desire as a victim of white supremacy, white people to do. There's a passage in there, some suggestions about what to say to white people. So he could just read it, or have somebody read it to him, or tell him what it's about, and see if he'll do it. And if he does it, we'll be on the road. But actually, as a personality and all like that, see, the code tries to get away from personalities, period.
Mm-hmm.
Try to get, logic is the leader. The creator of the universe made a thing called logic, something that the white supremacists try to guarantee that black people never try to use. They steer black people away from anything logical. So we just jump up and do anything any kind of old way, which is what we usually do, which is why we are not successful at doing anything that makes sense.
Okay.
The white supremacists have a code, right. So in answer to the question, I don't think that would be necessary, because then the focus would be on Neely Fuller. The focus should be on logic.
Yes.
That's how you solve problems. This is universal law, not Neely Fuller's law.
Gotcha. Well, a supplemental question to that. Would you feel the same way about that if somebody from MSNBC wanted to put you on national TV to discuss that? Would you feel the same way?
I don't like the personality thing. This is why the code is not about personalities. The code will work for anybody. It's like picking up a pair of pliers. You just learn how to work the pair of pliers.
Okay.
That's what a code is. You know how to use the pliers. So the pliers don't care who picks it up. I mean, the pliers are going to do what pliers do. A screwdriver will do what a screwdriver does. A car will do what a car does. Doesn't make any difference who the driver is. The car is going to do what a car does.
Oh, right.
And that's what we need. We need something that's solid for everybody.
Yeah.
All they have to do is walk up to the table and pick it up and use it.
Focus on the logic. Got that.
Yes, and not the person.
Not the person.
I mean, that's fatal. The white supremacists build black people up and then tear them down. We ought to be on to that by now.
Okay, another question here. Did you get any notice from your next appearance, or I guess we don't see you, but your next time that you're on the Carl Nelson show out of Washington, D.C.?
No, haven't heard anything as of now. But this is just the beginning of a month. So usually I'm on that show once a month, and that might be at any time. But any time I get any word that I would be on WOL 1450 on your dial, the Carl Nelson show, that's AM. Also, they have an FM that you can probably get, but it will be posted at the time that I'm on the Carl Nelson show interview. Radio 1, Kathy Hughes station.
Yeah, I've asked your people to contact me so I could tell my people who follow me, when you're going to be on.
And I usually put it on the website if I get the information in time.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Okay, let's go. This will probably be the final question here. This is from Mr. Haynes. He says this. Good morning, Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, what does the code say about music?
Music? Oh, well, for those who don't have the book, evidently, and those who have the book, I talk about music under entertainment, because music is usually used to entertain. And so but also music is educational, which is how it should be used. So what's the difference? What is music? So the code defines music as being sound, because there are only two types of sound in the universe, music and noise. So what's the difference between music and noise? There's two types of sound, according to the code. And if somebody thinks of a third or fourth type of sound, I'd like to know what it is. But logically speaking, there are just two types of sound in the entire universe. There's two. Music is one, noise is the other. What's the difference between music and noise? Music is anything that you hear, that when you hear it, you think about doing something constructive. That's according to the code. If you ever want to know the difference between music, if a music teacher even asks that question, whatnot, you can advance your idea, according to the code, if you want to, about what you think it is. Music is any sound that when a person hears it, that person is inspired to do something of constructive value. That's music. Noise is anything that a person hears, or an animal hears, or anything that hears, that you will do something non-constructive. And that's the only difference between music and noise. There's two types of sound in the universe, music and noise. And when you hear a certain sound, does it inspire you to do something constructive, or does it inspire you to do something non-constructive?
Okay. All right.
Noise. Well, if you hear something and you want to do something that's non-constructive, something that's destructive, that's noise that you're listening to.
Okay.
Because you were inspired to do something that's non-constructive.
All righty. We have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to the end of the show, so Mr. Fuller, I'd like to give you this time to discuss anything you want to discuss before we end the show.
Well, pay attention to words, because evidently I'm failing at that miserably on this program. Every word, just like I just mentioned. I spent a lot of time this 2 hours talking about America, how to use that word. Don't use it in any way except you're talking about a person. There's no such thing as an American ocean or an American eagle. Eagles don't know anything about being Americans. I mean, I don't think. There's no such thing as an American flag except in the form of a person. So what is that person? A person that practices justice. And since nobody practices justice, nobody is qualified to be an American yet, because it's impossible to practice justice in the system of white supremacy. You can't have white supremacy and justice on the same planet at the same time. It's absolutely impossible, because white supremacy is about non-justice. So you don't have any Americans yet. That's an idea. It's a wonderful idea. Why? Because an American is a person that practices justice. Everybody should want to be an American, and an African, and an Asian, but you don't have any of the three. Why? Because the world is dominated by non-justice. That's why, in the form of something called white supremacy.
All righty. Got to leave it there, Mr. Fuller, so thank you for that. We'd like to thank everybody that called in. Thank you. Everybody that wrote in, thank you. And Mr. Fuller, we definitely like to thank you. We made a lot of mistakes today, so we will try to be better on the next program. But thank you for listening. Thank you for all your calls. Mr. Fuller, the final word before we go.
Final word is produce justice. Replace the system of white supremacy. Become codified. We need a code.
All righty. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for listening. Bye.